everyone. So just a reminder that the podcast is now being sponsored by my favorite photo lab in New York City, Picture House in the Small Darkroom, which I'm super psyched about.
Yes.
Not just because they're sponsoring the podcast, but because we're going to be doing a lot of different things with them. They're going to be involved with our mentorship program and some other things we have that we're working on.
Yeah, this is a really nice partnership.
Awesome partnership.
Yeah.
It's a perfect fit, right? So Picture House in the Small Darkroom, for those who don't know, is a darkroom and post-production studio that's been servicing the photo community in New York City since 1996, so they know what they're doing. So if you have a question about film, their amazing staff can help you with processing, high-res scanning, darkroom printing, digital post. And they have an amazing team, most of whom have been with them for more than 5 years, and a lot of them close to 20 years, which is, I think, says a lot about the people at the top and how they interact with the people who work there. And they really care about the work that goes through the shop. And it doesn't matter if it's doing one print, single frame scan, or a huge 200 image post-production advertising job. They give all the jobs the same amount of love and attention. So, and I want to say, because I think this is super cool, they just opened a little photo book store.
Yes.
There at the facility, so you can go and drop off film or whatever and hang out in their photo book store. There's a couch there. And it's really highly curated titles. They do artist talks and book signings. So these people are in our world. We love them.
And check out their events, even if they're not related to our events.
Yes. They are autonomous.
That's right.
They've been around a lot longer than us. And how do folks get in touch with them?
Right. So check them out at PHTSDR. That's for Picture House, the Small Darkroom.com. And you can also check out their really great Instagram account at the same name, PHTSDR. And they have a lot of great postings there. And they've been sharing some of our posts there, which is really nice.
Yeah. Very nice of them.
And then you can also, at their website, see all the upcoming events.
Right on. Okay. So once again, Picture House in the Small Darkroom, welcome to the PhotoWork family.
Yes, welcome.
All right, let's do this. Peanut, if you're staying in the room, no talking. Hello and welcome to the PhotoWork podcast. I almost just said welcome to the PhotoWork Darkroom.
In honor of our new sponsor.
And right at the last minute, I was like, that's not right.
Wait a minute. Is that a tease? No.
That's Michael, and he and I just recorded a promo for Picture House in the Small Darkroom, and obviously my brain needed a little bit more time before running into the intro.
Should have spaced that out a little more.
Oh my God, just not that nimble anymore. All right, let's leave this blooper in and keep rolling. Hello and welcome to the PhotoWork podcast, the talky and touchy-feely version of I think it's a book, PhotoWork, 40 photographers on process and practice, the thing we love, process and practice, and the inner workings of everyone's mind. I'm Sasha Wolf, and joined as usual by the man single-handedly holding up the state of New Jersey, along with Cory Booker, Mr. Michael Chovan Dalton. Yes. Hello, Michael.
Hello. I do love Cory Booker. Yes.
How are you?
I'm doing all right. Getting over a little cold, I think, induced by allergies, which I know a lot of people are feeling right now in this part of the world. So
yes. My allergies are actually every spring. The PhotoWork podcast has a conversation about allergies.
We do.
So to our dedicated listeners, this will all be familiar. But it's interesting. So we're behind you, right? So when I'm in the city, my allergies have been terrible the past few weeks. But up here, they're moderate.
That's nice.
Because it's colder up here, but it'll come and get me.
Yeah.
and I'm going to be in the city in 2 days. So I'll be suffering right along with you. But just so you don't feel too alone, I pulled my back this morning, so I'm hobbling around. So we're together. We're
Good.
a couple of old, decrepit people.
Here we are, falling apart, keeping the show going.
The wheels. I think I
Yes.
just heard the sound of wheels falling off. Anyway, so we have a lot going on, and I can't remember if in the last podcast I think we mentioned that we're going to have a live Zoom coming up.
Yeah.
Taylor is going to drop that info any day. I think I can say it's on May 24th.
I think so.
Taylor, don't magically appear in front of me and smack me over the head.
Yeah, I was going to say, we might hear from
cast
Taylor
iron
later.
Right. Be like, you knuckleheads. Anyway, I won't say any more, but that's that. Put it on your calendar.
That's right. Check out the photowork.foundation site for more information.
Yep. And we just coming down the home stretch on putting all the little bits and pieces together for the mentorship program, which we'll launch soon.
Yeah.
And that's a lot, but we have a great advisory committee, and they're working on this as well. And what else? We have a great episode today, most importantly, with the wonderful, really interesting artist, Carolyn Drake. So I had a fantastic time talking to Carolyn. She's such a deep thinker, and she's just really sensitive and honest, and I was really mesmerized at times. Did you enjoy the conversation?
Yes. I mean, when you think of someone who speaks with no pretension, Carolyn speaks like that. It is so honest, and I love the way she thinks about who she's photographing and where she's photographing. And I was especially, I especially identified with the idea of trying to figure out what home is, something I've done for a long time, and what that means, and how to be part of a society or a culture, or just how to be part of where you want to live. And I really appreciated that.
Yeah. I'm with you. I mean, I know you've experienced that for more complicated reasons that you can talk about or not talk about. Obviously, home and what home is always been very complicated. For me, it's much more recent. You know, both my folks passed away in the past year and a half. And all of a sudden, as people who have experienced that know, it's extremely disorienting. Your parents, assuming you have, at least a decent relationship with them, and I was very close to my parents, really give you a sense of being rooted. And, between that and moving upstate, I think about this all the time, but obviously for you, it's
my story's pretty complicated. I'll keep it kind of short. I was, adopted and then orphaned very young by my adopted parents, and so I have this, I've moved around quite a bit, and I have this kind of nomadic instinct to not really feel attached to any one place, and I had to overcome that for my own kids. So I wanted them to feel a certain belonging to a place, to identify with a place, and I have to sort of hold myself back from saying, let's move.
Right, yeah.
Just because I feel like it, yeah.
Right, yeah, of course. No, I'm sure that instinct is very deep-seated. In you. For me, it was the opposite, by the way. It's sort of funny. It's like, for me, my instinct's always been like, stay. Life was very shaky for me, also when I was very young, but for me, it translated into just stay and don't cause any problems, and don't rock the boat, and, make sure things don't go sideways again. But now I'm sort of cut free. I mean, so it's interesting. But anyway, Carolyn, really, her discussion of this is and how it manifests within her is really interesting. And then, of course,
and it's rooted in the work she makes. So absolutely,
yes, exactly. Yeah. Well, on that note, with a long intro, but I think folks can put up with us. So, but we'll get to it now. So, Michael, if you don't mind, please take it away.
My pleasure, and here is your conversation with Carolyn Drake.
Carolyn Carolyn Drake, welcome to the PhotoWork podcast. It's awesome to have you on. I'm so happy we worked this out. Looking forward to getting into it all with you. But yeah, so we start every podcast with, you know, your journey. Where are you from? And when did you start studying photography? Where are you now, etc. So if you could tell us about yourself, that would be awesome.
Okay, well, I am 51 years old, so it's a very long story. And right now, I am sitting in a room that was meant to be a bedroom that my parents could stay in when they came here, but it is actually a storage room. So I am surrounded by decades worth of hard drives and books and collected things from different projects that belong to both me and my partner, Andres. And both of them are intermingled together, and it's on all sides of me. So it's kind of like the chaos of my origin story is surrounding me right now.
Yeah, literally. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I was born in Los Angeles. My first home was married student housing at UCLA. My dad was getting a PhD in plasma physics.
Wow.
And my parents moved across the country to Maryland when I was 6 years old. So I was displaced quite early in life from the golden utopian world of California to Greenbelt, Maryland. And I grew up in Greenbelt. That's kind of, I don't have much to say about Greenbelt right now, but eventually I left Greenbelt and I went to college at Brown University, and I studied a combination of American Studies and something that we called MCM, which was Modern Culture and Media. And that was really my first exposure to like the idea of visual culture and art. I mean, not art. I still didn't really know what art was at that point, but I got really into, I mean, I had actually planned to study physics in college because that's what I was good at, because that's what my dad did.
Yeah.
But at Brown, I discovered film. Like I took these classes where we watched and analyzed a lot of films. And then I was also studying like critical theory and feminist theory and using those things to think about the films and analyze them. And so I think that provided a kind of core for me that has carried on over the decades of like this kind of critical perspective, like this love of visual culture and other aspects of culture, but also a kind of tendency to put a critical eye on it. And then,
makes sense.
Yeah, and I took a photo class at RISD while I was there, but it was just for fun at the very end once I had finished all of my requirements.
Yeah, Rhode Island School of Design, which is right near Brown.
Yeah. And then I spent several years in New York trying to pay off my loans and learn how to make a living and figure out actually what to do with my life. And I think when I turned 30 was when I started taking photo classes like, okay, I gotta figure out something that I really like here. And I had this job in multimedia. So it kind of corporate / publishing. I mean, it was corporate, I would say. Like working with teams of people to produce multimedia things like CD-ROMs and then websites, creating like interactive products for a long time. And I just realized I needed more independence. And that's kind of when I chose photography. And I took a class at ICP with Jeff Jacobson. I don't know if you ever knew him, but actually I took a couple classes at ICP. But Jeff was like this person who believed, like we had this one assignment where we were going to go out on a street corner and just stay there all day with our camera and see what happened. And I ended up doing this photo shoot on that day, which he just brought attention to. I just could feel that he believed in me after that. And it meant so much, that one little, it was like the first time I kind of believed that this could be actually something that I could do because this person believed in me.
Yep,
And
I get it.
that's kind of my origin story. But, my origin story is continuing to this day. But that's kind of like the origin story up to turning 30.
And then, I mean, so much obviously has happened. So how did some of those things that we'll talk about, like, you're part of Magnum, you've published many books, blah, blah, blah. I didn't mean to blah, blah, blah your career. But, how did you then sort of take off into having a career? I am always, that word is so loaded, but you know what I mean, for lack of a better word.
Well, I guess the starting point for that was leaving New York. I went to this graduate program in visual communication at Ohio University, which I think at the time it was good for me in some ways because it was the first time I kind of devoted my life to photography. Like, this is the real deal. But it was also, very oriented towards photojournalism and formulas in some way. Like, there was a certain amount of teaching you the right way to do things, which I didn't realize how much of that there would be. So there were good things and bad things about it. But that's kind of helped me launch into a career where I could do assignments. I got a internship for National Geographic, which is a magazine that I worked for that helped me make a living for many years. But just like Ohio University, I kind of have some mixed feelings about those experiences. But, like I said earlier, when I was in college, I learned to have a critical perspective on things. So, when I think of OU and when I think of National Geographic, I've spent a lot of time kind of dissecting the problems of those institutions. And I think I came to art eventually in response to the problems I had with the journalism world. But I think let's see what happened. I got after OU, I got a Fulbright, and I lived in Ukraine for a year on this Fulbright. And that was kind of amazing because it was a year of freedom and learning how to live in a place that had a different ideological framework than where I was from, in a different language and different climate. And then from there, I ended up living abroad for almost a decade. I moved with my partner, Andres, to Istanbul, and we both kind of worked on independent projects while
Andres is also a photographer.
Yeah, Andres Gonzalez. We actually met in grad school. That's, I guess, the other positive development that came out of grad school. Yeah, he's now getting more into film, but we lived in Istanbul and kind of found projects and found assignments and had this very liberated, low budget, exciting learning life for many years in Istanbul. And then I think we decided, I feel like my life pans out in decades. Like every decade I kind of reinvent myself. But part of leaving the United States was feeling freed from like the categories that you have to play into and of how you think about the world here. Like the economic categories, the race categories, the gender categories, like it feels very fixed and redundant here, like the way things are organized. And living in and spending a lot of time in other places and detaching from this country, it was liberating in many ways, but we also eventually decided we needed to face where we came from and start having the courage to deal with that. So we moved back here and we didn't really know where to go, but we really wanted to engage with the country. But of course, there's no one single way to engage or one single place that, you know, defines what this country is. So we took a road trip from, I thought, oh, let's move to Omaha, Nebraska for some reason. And Andreas was like, let's move to New Orleans. And we took this
I'm with Andreas, but anyway, no disrespect to Omaha. Sorry, but...
Oh, yeah, I know. I mean, in retrospect, I don't know. I think, you know, after living in Istanbul, It is the most chaotic, crazy city. I think I needed a break from like the most the most dynamic and populated city in the world.
Right.
But we took this road trip from Omaha to New Orleans, and we made a compromise and decided to move to Memphis. It's kind of halfway in between. Mm-hmm. And then that didn't really work out within the first week. So we ended up in this, like, this is how our life goes. It's not really pre-planned.
I'm getting that, yeah.
We ended up in this small town in Mississippi. Well, I mean, part of what we were looking for, I think, was how can we live as independent artists in a place where, you know, we're not rich, we don't make that much money. How can we afford to live in this country and be creative and independent? And what we found this small town called Water Valley in Mississippi, which was kind of in the process of reviving and being reinvented. And so we spent a couple years there. Then, to make a long story short, we spent several years trying to find our place in this country. And we moved to Athens, Georgia for a year. And then finally, we migrated back to his homeland and a place where I have roots as well. And that's in California.
And have you found home?
Well, we do have a home, which we spend a lot of time trying to fix up and make it work right. But we also spend a lot of time thinking about other options. So I can't say that it's permanent.
Yeah.
Sometimes we think
you're non-monogamous in the home department.
Yes.
Or serial monogamist. I don't know. Yeah. This joke's going nowhere.
But I left.
The check's in the mail.
I mean, this town where we live is Vallejo. We obviously invested a lot of time in trying to think about like what place we wanted to be in this country. And like even within California, what really sold us on it is I had actually taken this, I was trying to work on this project, like tracing this family diary of a distant relative who had migrated to California on the Oregon Trail, and it ended up in Vallejo. And so I was staying here trying to make pictures, and I was like, this is a ghost town. This town feels like it's dead. And then Andres and I went to a taco truck for lunch one day, and it was like this wooden picnic table and all kinds of people. It just felt like the example of diversity that like I wanted from America that I just had struggled to find. And here it was sitting at this picnic table. And that kind of sold us on the idea of settling down here for a while.
Oh, that's a lovely sort of vignette. So thank you for all of that. That was really interesting. And I think there's a lot of stuff in there that's, says a lot about living as an artist and, how someone like you who's won Guggenheim Fellowships and had the Fulbright, as you said, and has published many books, and that it's still really a challenge, and and is a member of Magnum, etc. That it's still really a challenge, both to find, in your case, your home, but from a sort of artistic standpoint, to find a way of making it work, even with a certain amount of what we would consider success and recognition. And I know from the different work you've created that, you're still, it seems, also really grappling with, what type of artist you are, even though each project you do seems extremely confident. And, each one of your projects is so rigorous and deeply considered and really tight formally, but obviously, can see you sort of grappling with maybe not what type of artist you want to be, but you're certainly open to flowing with whatever is in you at the moment. So, your most recent book was published by TBW in 2020 is a book called Knit Club, And it's really an incredible book. I mean, just a really incredible achievement. So congratulations. Got a ton of recognition and has been exhibited in many places and was shortlisted for the Perry Photo Aperture Book of the Year. And, Knit Club feels very different than some of the work you made earlier that you were very well known for, such as Two Rivers. So and could you tell folks about those two projects, just using them as an example, and then we'll talk more about Knit Club. But obviously we don't have this is an audio recording, so we have to try and attempt to explain to people what the work looks like. But, yeah.
I definitely have, just to kind of backtrack a little bit, I've definitely allowed myself to follow my gut in the current moment. Like I've kind of allowed myself to be that kind of artist rather than somebody who I'm just not somebody who has found a consistent. I mean, I think my voice is my voice. Like all the work that I've made comes from me and comes from my brain and my inclinations, but those are changing and in flux. And so I'm definitely someone who embraces change and values like the ability to change and be fluid more than fixing my art as something clearly definable, for better or worse. And I think Two Rivers was a project that I worked on while I was based in Istanbul, and it followed these two rivers across, I think, 5 different countries. So they start in the mountains near the border between China and Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. And then they flow back and forth across the borders of 5 different countries that end with the phrase "stan." So Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan. And they flow down to the Aral Sea, which used to be one of the largest lakes in the world, and it has kind of turned into an environmental disaster as a result of excessive farming and irrigation. And so I traveled through these countries for several years, kind of making pictures in not a formal way, kind of reportage, I guess you could call it, but not reportage either. Like, I think the pictures weren't meant to have captions. They're meant to be lyrical, if possible. That was the goal, at least. So that was a multi-year project, and that's what gave me the Guggenheim. But I was also working on that alongside this project, Wild Pigeon, which was in the western part of China. And the reason I mentioned Wild Pigeon is just because I think when I finished Two Rivers and I dove into trying to finish Wild Pigeon, I think a lot of my ideas about photography started to fall apart. Like my impulse for being out there and making these pictures out in the world, telling stories about other people's lives. Like I really started to lose the ability to validate in my own head doing that. And with Wild Pigeon, I ended up inviting the people I had photographed to remake my images. And to me, that was kind of a turning point. Like then I also kind of moved back to the United States soon after that. And it was like, how can I do photography anymore? Because what the real meaning came when the people in the pictures actually made the final image. So what is my role here, and how can I do anything else with photography? So I think after that...
Was that a crisis? I mean, I don't mean to over-dramatize anything.
I feel like everything is a crisis for me, really. Like, my latest project is a crisis, but that was a crisis, yeah. But it wasn't like a
And I just want to
say, crisis.
I'm sorry, I want to let you finish, but I do want to say, because I think it's important that work, there was a solo exhibition of that work at San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, a 6-month solo exhibition. So it's very well received. So the whatever crisis you're having has nothing to do with the reception to it. This is just going on inside of you, it seems like.
It's also, I think it's also, it was going on inside of me, but I think there's things going on inside the photo world too. We're all kind of, a lot of people think, I mean, it's been going on since before I started photography. I was like,
who has a right to photograph who? That talked about.
Yeah,
yes.
like when I was in college, we talked about documentary as a problem.
Right.
And that was like 3 decades ago.
Right.
So
yeah, but it has come to a head for sure over the past number of years, few years.
Yeah, it has. And so, I've been definitely thinking about that and thinking of like in making the new work, and especially in Knit Club, like I think in Knit Club, I really resisted the whole idea of documentation and really kind of pushed to create work that's rooted in the real world and real feelings in the world, but that is not trying to document what's happening in the real world. There's a lot of mixing up things in the real world to create something that wasn't actually there, but that still feels kind of real because it is kind of real, if that makes sense. And also, there's obviously in that work, there's this a lot of covering up of faces, which I think like in part that impulse is like psychological in me, like driven by something that was in my gut more than my rational mind. But there's also some rational explanations that I've come up with for it. And I think it has to do with wanting to resist photography's claim to like connecting with a person's soul. Like photography is just a flat piece of paper. And so I started feeling like I don't want to even play that game of like representing this human being. It had this falseness that I didn't feel like dealing with, at least at that time. And also just when it comes to, because the project is exploring a community of women in this small Mississippi town that I had become part of. I had become part of this community. And so I had a lot of thoughts about representing women that also stems back from like things that I kind of studied a lot in college. Just the idea of the male gaze. Very simple things that I think as I came back to the United States, these like strong feelings I had about that reemerged in me. And I really wanted to resist, like, how could I make pictures with women that was resisting the voyeuristic gaze that was kind of the classic thing you do with the camera and women. So yeah, that's kind of where I was coming from with the Knit Club work. And also just, I think I was becoming more personal. Like I was dealing at that time with questions about choices I had made in my life about basically not deciding not to have kids. And I found myself really kind of nurtured by being around these women who all had kids and these bonds they seemed to have with each other, and wanting to be part of that and questioning why I had tried to kind of avoid that my whole life by running off around the world all alone with my camera. And so I think in that work, I was also exploring this kind of attraction and repulsion I had to those qualities of like femininity or like women's identity that are kind of part of our culture. And
so Knit Club, how do we describe Knit Club? How would you describe it? Let me just say it's extremely unusual body of work. So how would you just describe it to the listeners who don't have the book in front of them like I do?
Well, I'm not very good at like the 2-sentence elevator pitch. But I'll try. I
mean, I could read. I have a description that Vince wrote in front of me. I'm happy to read if you prefer. Would that be better?
Yeah, why don't you read that?
Okay. So the humid atmosphere she conjures in the pictures in the book, well, he's talking about the show also, but anyway, at Yancey, resembles a feminine counterpart to the first season of HBO's True Detective. With its twisty take on Southern Gothic and the charged intersection of the occult and outsider art. Her subjects, all but one, women, are often seen through a smoky haze or otherwise partly hidden. The first picture in the book is of a woman who sits with her hands clasped and her upturned face covered in the slathered white bandages used to make a life cast. Another subject holds a finished mask in her hands like an empty bowl, a replica more alien than familiar. Other women look away or hide behind drapes or a yellowed newspaper. Drake herself appears wearing a pink negligee and an eagle head mask, a Halloween leftover that could be playful, but here, amid other bits of strangeness, suggests some sort of ritual gathering. Does that not... Had you not seen that?
No, I have seen that. I haven't looked at that in a long time, but I mean, I think I definitely tapped into the Southern Gothic. I mean, I
think Vince is a great writer, by the way. I love him. I love the way he writes about photography. So
yeah, and I was so thrilled when that review came out. I felt, very honored that Vince had written about my work. The only thing that I questioned was the reference to the TV show. I wasn't sure how I felt about that.
Well, I think he was trying to connect with, it's I think a good way of sort of a current cultural reference that he was. And in some ways, the work is so unusual that I actually thought that was quite brilliant that he did that. Because if you're not looking at the work, it is just so unusual. And the minute he uses that reference, and I don't know how many people saw that first season of True Detective, but it is so strange and so disorienting, but also so beautifully done and so cinematic. And so in a way, I actually thought it was just a really brilliant reference. Very Vince, because I think he's brilliant.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, I mean, the book is, it's interesting to hear you talk about, how you got involved and what you wound up doing, looking for your place and motherhood, and which is obviously such an emotional topic, so primal. And then the pictures that came out of that, which are very moving at times, but also extremely strange and borderline on menacing is not the right word, but there is a light, there's a light menace in some ways in some of the pictures. I do want to underline something I think I said earlier. They're spectacularly beautiful. I mean, often when I look at work, I really don't, understand right away. I got to just be like, hang in there, Sasha, hang in. With this work, it's so beautiful that you just, you're going to keep going. I mean, and hope you find your way through. But the power, the beauty is so seductive in these pictures.
Well, thank you. I think the menace, you mentioned the word menace, and I think I wanted to play with that feeling of, I'm depicting these women. You don't really know what's going on. So there's a feeling of uncertainty, unknowingness. And in our culture, we tend to, there's this history of when women are doing things that you don't quite understand, that are out of the ordinary, that I can't quite explain. It feels menacing. And
that's really interesting.
And I wanted to play with that feeling. Why do you feel menaced? Because we have this baggage of associations. So I wanted to play with that kind of legacy that is attached to unknowingness related to women's activities.
Wow, yeah, that's really interesting. And tell me about the emphasis on the aesthetics and how you think about that.
Well, I mean, I can describe a little bit how it came about, and maybe that would explain part of it. I had a grant to make work in the South, and I was like, let me just go take pictures and see what happens. And then it just wasn't going anywhere. And I had this bad accident I was doing a police ride-along in this town, and this assistant and I got in a car accident with a policeman who was chasing a man down from Memphis who was trying to escape. And it was just this point where I was like, this is not what I'm looking for. And
no.
And also around the same time, this woman who's a textile artist in this town, I had decided to kind of collaborate with her and have her help me embroider these rugs that I was going to put in my exhibition at SF MoMA. So I decided to put down the camera and just sit with her and work on these embroidered rugs for a couple of weeks. And she had all these friends who were into making quilts and sewing. And so they all came too. And we would kind of take turns being together. I mean, sometimes I was alone, sometimes I was with Coulter, sometimes there would be 5 of us sitting there kind of around this quilting structure, just talking and like using the needle and thread. And it just was a moment of connection that I felt. And it was really, what I really reflect on is that I put down the camera for a while and allowed something to come without having the camera with me. Mm-hmm. But it was kind of, I ended up drawing from their lives and their environments and finding, because I became really interested in like sewing and textiles at that point. And so I was interested in these materials from their lives. And I started working with those materials and borrowing those materials and borrowing the spaces that they lived in or that they were interested in. So that was the source, I guess, of the visuals. Mm-hmm. Like the objects from their lives and their bodies and their children and their environments. But, you know, like if you want to think about the aesthetic inspirations for that, like afterwards, you know, people started talking how it's surrealism, you know, and I was learning about Dora Maar, and I did not know about Dora Maar. Like I hadn't even thought of surrealism much before. So I think, and Dorothea Lange, like people kind of think there's one image in particular that, you know, people connect to Dorothea Lange, but
I know which one.
Those things were like afterwards. I think it was just the desire to create something that was an alternative to like documenting the real world and to draw on the inspiration that I was finding and the excitement that I had about this connection with these women, and also like I wanted to make something more than what was there. Like that we have all these associations, like what the South is like and what Southern women are like, and these women aren't like that. But I wanted to kind of create a kind of body of work where it's like, no, the world isn't what we think it is. Mm-hmm. And especially photography doesn't have to make the world what it is. It can make anything. And so I kind of wanted to work with photography to make almost like an alternate world rather than fixing it as like a definition of what it is.
Did you discover anything about yourself as an artist through this project? I mean, I'm sorry, I'm probably embarrassing you because I'm going to compliment you again. But did you think like, oh my God, like, I mean, you've made a lot of incredibly beautiful photographs in your career, but this sort of, to me, is like a pinnacle. I mean, did you look at these and think, wow, like, holy cow. I mean, you know, your just attention to color palette is extraordinary, and the compositions are mind-boggling. I mean, the one with the girl or woman, I always think of it as a girl up the tree with the snake, and which I think of as the Garden of Eden picture. Mm-hmm. But, you know, they're really staggeringly spectacular. And
that's nice of you to say. One thing I've been kind of thinking through a lot in the past year is like kind of the value of being an artist who isn't concerned with what other people think. Mm-hmm. You know, you make what you're compulsed to make. Mm-hmm. And in an ideal world, like I wouldn't worry about what people think of it. You know, I wouldn't worry about whether the audience understands it. Although, I mean, that's a little tricky thing. But I think the goal is to make what you're inspired to make. When I showed the work to Paul Sheik at TBW Books, and, you know, it was really amazing to have, Paul is a very passionate person. And, you know, I think with every project he works on, he thinks it's the best book that was ever made.
Right.
And so he really expressed kind of a love for this work and a belief in the work, and that helped me believe in it. I mean, I felt good about kind of pushing my boundaries while I was making it, and the experimentation and the way I was really drawing from, it had things in common with the documentary process because I was engaging with this place pretty deeply and connecting with people there. And because of those relationships I had with people, I was able to set up certain situations that were rooted in this real place. And so I felt good about that, but it also felt good to have Paul kind of
we're human,
take an interest in the work.
Would it be fair to say that because you felt so deeply about these people and this place, and that you were really a part of it and connected and you had developed relationships, that intensity of feeling is also doing a lot for the pictures, the real intensity of your own feelings? Because the work is very emotional as well.
Yeah.
And how did that feel? I mean, one thing that I just want to weave into that question is you had a recorded conversation with Sarah Meister, the executive director of Aperture, in which you said, I spent much of my career running from this interior domestic space. And I just wonder if, now being in that and forming these powerful relationships is also a reason why the work is so beautiful. I'm a romantic. What can I say?
Yeah, I mean, I think it taps into an emotional state, I think. But I mean, I've actually, because like the past, 9 months or so, I've been talking to a therapist for the first time ever. And this whole idea of getting it, thank you. This whole idea of getting in touch with your emotions, like, I think making this work was a way of expressing my emotions in a way that I hadn't articulated yet.
Yeah.
Like rationally.
Yeah, that's what it feels like.
And I think, there's also benefits to learning what your emotions are so you can understand it in a rational way. But I think making work in a way has become an emotional process for me. And I mean, it also makes it more intense to deal with, I think.
Yeah, well, you're more vulnerable, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Which is, difficult. It's difficult. I mean, I think that's the most difficult part about being an artist, right? That vulnerability of if you're really putting yourself in the work. That's why it can hurt so much when someone doesn't like something you've done. And, I've been there. I used to be a filmmaker and, you try and tough it out, but, you put the most vulnerable part of yourself out there and someone's like, meh, or, I don't, it hurts. It's hard. It's really painful.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and then there's when money is attached to it. Also, that's another complication.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just the money factor becomes how the work is valued. Like, how much money can you make off of it? If you're trying to make a living off of it. I mean, and that's a weird can of worms that, I'd rather not think about. But I think artists have these conversations all the time. But I mean, like, the work that I've been making in the last couple of years is, God, I feel like that's the most vulnerable of all. It's like, I mean, I don't think I'm going to, I don't want to define it right now. Because I've approached this subject of men, I think, for the first time. And I don't know if it's masculinity or it came down to the male body, but I think I found that I don't have the same, true love for men that I photographed the same way I did for example, the women in Knit Club. And so how does that translate into the images? Like, the images are pretty honest and they're not quite as loving as the Knit Club images. And what the hell are people going to say about that? But you kind of have to just do what's in, the way I'm thinking about it now, it's like, that's what's been in me in this last couple of years. And there are reasons for it. And I'm going to put it out there.
Good. I look forward to seeing it when it's ready. I think you're doing exactly what you should be doing. That's what makes an artist. I think that component of bravery and honesty is essential, just to state the obvious, my specialty. Well, on that note, we're approaching that time. Thank you so much, Carolyn, for talking with me. I have enjoyed talking with you so much, and such a interesting and lovely person. And I look forward to our paths crossing sometime, maybe soon. And really just thank you so much for talking with us today.
Well, I'm honored that you invited me, and it's been a pleasure to have a conversation with you. And you're a very warm and generous podcaster.
Thank you. In real life, not so great, but on the podcast. All right, so take care, be well, and until we meet again.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Have a good week.
Yeah, you too.
Bye.
Bye.
PhotoWork with Sasha Wolf is produced by me, Michael Chauvin-Dalton of Real Photo Show. The associate producer is Taylor Selsback, and the executive producer is Sasha Wolf. Our theme music is by J. Walter Hawks. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe and rate us with all the stars available on your listening platform.